Dziękuję serdecznie. Dobrze. Faktycznie ja będę mówić po angielsku, więc przepraszam, że nie jestem jedynym cudzoziemcem, który po polsku przedstawia. So let's go into English. Dziękuję. I have two other objectives for this presentation, which don't necessarily include me talking Polish and confusing people. So anyway, I don't know, I can start. The title of this presentation is Libraries Between Piracy and the Privatization of Knowledge. So one of my objectives here is to set out, it's an argument, it's a way of thinking about the role of libraries, about what they do in the copyright system, why they help make it sustainable, why they help it work, and why they need help themselves to continue playing this role. As Jonas warned you, I guess, it's also going to be an opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing at Wyber and encourage people to look beyond Europe, because sometimes looking beyond Europe is very good for your faith in humanity. Sadly, Europe is not always a particularly enjoyable place. It's going to work. That's good. Okay. Yep. Okay. So, down. That's cool. That's cool. So, effectively, if you click again, so in effect, the role of libraries in the copyright system is in effect, it's between the two stereotypes. It's between pirates on the left, the people who are, knowledge should be free, free culture, we'll just take it from anywhere, etc. And of course, this is maybe a small minority of people think this, but it's not a mainstream view. There's then also the copyright troll, the monopolist who's only in it for the money and just cares about their bank account. So, very good. So, very good, thank you. So the format of the slides was better when I did them. So, what is the role of libraries? Effectively, you can see libraries as playing a balancing role. So first of all, they acquire their content, they buy it. They spend about $28 billion a year around the world on buying books, journals, encyclopedias, databases, other resources. 5 billion in Europe alone. And then, of course, they make it available. I've talked about the socialization of knowledge. So their action means that creators are receiving money, or publishers are receiving money, and then deciding how much they want to give to creators. But then you can access it. So the families, the school children can come to their public library and read. Researchers, scientists who simply couldn't afford all the materials that they're working with themselves can go to the university library, the research library, Jonas's members to do this. And the thing that allows them to do this are the exceptions and limitations to copyright. The things that allow libraries to take copies of books so that researchers can use them, that allow them to share books, resources between libraries so that researchers, so that individuals can use them. There's the things that allow them to take a preservation copy of a book because the original format won't last forever, and if we want to keep it, we have to take a copy. So what are the problems that libraries therefore help to resolve? Now, copyright, as everyone, you're here because you're interested in copyright. If you're not, then you're in the wrong place. Copyright is a monopoly right, and the graph top right, this is what happens when you have a monopoly. The instinct, and this dates from Adam Smith and the birth of free market economics, if someone has a monopoly right, they will produce less than the market requires and they will charge more than they could. And as a result, people are excluded from access to knowledge. Libraries help get around this. Secondly, we don't always do, and we can't always do, the things that we should with money. So, traditional example, this baby, maybe his parents, her parents, they can't buy all of the books to help the baby become a fully literate human being who can participate in society. However, if the baby grows up illiterate, then there's certainly going to be costs all around. Libraries again help. It's a way of allowing families to have access to knowledge. A similar example is that of the Liberian scientists who simply couldn't afford the article that would have told them that their country was in an Ebola risk zone. So this is, it's a clear example of a market failure. Libraries help get around this. Finally, there are some questions where money simply shouldn't be an issue. UN Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19 states very clearly freedom of expression and freedom of access to information is a fundamental human right. This should not be a money question at base. Once again, libraries are there to allow people to have access to this information. And therefore, everyone benefits. This is an optimistic way of putting things, but everyone does benefit. The children and families who have access to children's books and learn to read and learn to love reading. Teachers and educators who are helped in this. Vulnerable groups. Minority groups are overrepresented among the members of public libraries. Governments. Literacy is a clear priority. If you want productive human beings, productive citizens who can take part in society, libraries help. They also act as information centres. They're often the only public building into which you can walk freely in any area. They help in developing countries, where simply, once again, there isn't the money to access all of this material. So having a library that can give people access is vital. Creators and publishers. Libraries are fantastic free marketing. It's a great way of free marketing. People can experiment with books, they can try something out, then if they like it, they'll go and buy it. And finally, overall social and economic welfare. I think all of the talk we've had about value gap, I've been told I'm not allowed to call it value crap, even though it is. It fails to focus on overall welfare, overall value. It's not just profit, there's value at stake. So, what's making this difficult for libraries? Now, first of all, expectations are changing. People expect to be able to access materials remotely. They expect to be able to access materials across borders. It's difficult to understand why you can access something in one country but you can't get it from somewhere else, often because you don't know where the server is or whatever. Laws are bad a lot of the time. They're unclear, they're unreformed, they haven't taken account of the digital age, or they're simply unhinged. And I think in the European context you can think of a number of examples of unhinged laws. There's a market power issue. This is a serious issue for academic libraries, where the cost of academic journals has been going up over inflation for many years now. And when a university like Harvard cannot pay for the full range of academic journals, something is going wrong here. And finally, digital fail. An increasing share of library resources are going on buying digital materials. Now, when you buy a book, you have the book. It's yours. You can do what you want with it, more or less. However, with digital materials, you buy a license. And so, first of all, there's a contract, which sets out what you can do and what you can't do. And thanks to the principle of freedom of contract, you can be bound by this. The contract can take away the rights that have been given you through limitations and exceptions. There's also there's also technological protection measures, which Jonas mentioned, another fantastic way of stopping you doing with digital materials what you could do with physical materials. As a result, libraries, this is my script written up on the screen here, so there's new obligations, new uncertainties, new costs that they can't really deal with. They can't do what their users expect. The example that's often given, I don't know if anyone's heard of Sci-Hub, effectively it's Napster for academic articles. So you have a choice, either you go to the library, you have to go into the building, use the terminal to get the book, or there's this site that's based somewhere in Kazakhstan, which has all of the articles on it, has a fantastically well-designed, by all accounts, search mechanism. So you just type in the name of your article and up it comes. And it's quicker, faster, easier than libraries. So of course, if people are lazy, and it's been shown that it's difficult to persuade people that piracy is wrong if it's easy, so people just go to piracy, and everyone loses out. Libraries aren't getting people in, publishers certainly aren't getting money, and they're not getting the data that's one of their main growth areas at the moment. So in short, libraries get crushed. So what are we doing? Now, at national level, there are some fantastic examples going on. Poland is a great example of things that are happening. I don't know if Barbara Szczepanska is in the audience, but she played a fantastically central role in making sure that the new Polish copyright reform was sensible. One of our partner organisations, IFLA, whose logo I've removed, helpfully, does a lot of work on the ground in making sure that countries reform their copyright in a way that lets libraries perform that balancing role. Regional reforms, as the European Union, I don't need to talk more about that. Trade deals as well. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, obviously not popular, but there are measures in there that effectively export fair use, which, if you get rid of all the term extensions and all the stuff about TPM and all the other awful stuff, exporting fair use doesn't seem like such a bad idea. And then there's the global level. So WIPO, okay, WIPO is a UN organisation, it's dull, etc. It looks pretty, I found a nice day to photograph it. But it shouldn't be forgotten, for example, WIPO has just seen the entry into force of the Treaty of Marrakesh. And this was, firstly, it's the first international treaty that actually focuses exclusively on giving new rights to users, which is significant. It's also it's the WIPO copyright instrument that has entered into force. That means from the time between signature and enough ratifications to actually come into force. It's done that more quickly than any other WIPO copyright instrument in the last 40 years. So it shows that if you're doing the right thing, things go quickly. And I can tell you, I was fortunately there, the sense of satisfaction, of feeling good in that room at the first assembly, where the signatory countries, the ratifying countries got together, was really quite something. So it can do stuff. So the issue here is that we are asking for an international legal instrument. In effect, this is an instrument that sets down the limitations and exceptions to copyright, effectively the user's rights that should exist at an international level. One reason for this is that if you have an international treaty, it's easier to push countries into passing their own reforms. In Europe, we normally have relatively well-developed governments with a capacity to think, to research, to put together proposals. In a lot of developing countries, this doesn't exist. In a lot of developing countries, sadly, they will just copy-paste what exists in EU law, which is a terrible idea. I've seen examples, though. And so therefore, having this pressure from on top can make the difference. It facilitates cross-border uses. The example, all of the arguments we use within Europe about the importance of information flowing across borders for research purposes, but also for migrant communities, for the refugees who are coming from Syria. If you can do things across borders, if you can access materials across borders outside of Europe as well, the potential dividends are massive. Also, simply it would limit complexity. It's bad enough with 28 copyright systems in Europe, but 189 among the entire WIPO membership is a colossal nightmare. So, clearly at WIPO itself, it's the UN complexity. We're trying to limit complexity by putting ourselves through a lot of complexity in the short term. So, there are principles that have been discussed. The principles that copyright should serve nonetheless to allow personal, individual fulfillment. It should allow people to participate in society. It should allow them, I have to look at my notes here, it will allow them to preserve their history and so preserve diversity and avoid ending up in a sort of monoculture. It should take stock, it should recognise the fact of digitization, and it should allow for cross-border access to information and knowledge. There are 11 topics. We've been going through 11 different types of copyright exception. I can list them, they're boring, I can send a link, that's fine. Legal form is going to be a whole other issue. Can you call it a treaty? Should you have soft law, which will have more impact? So it's an ongoing discussion. And last slide, you'll be glad to hear, Krzysztof. The task for now is firstly we need to maintain momentum. WIPO takes time. The first talk of a treaty for the blind was in 1981. They only signed it in 2013. It only entered into force in September. We need to mobilise national efforts. And this, in Europe, it's difficult, and I mentioned that the EU is a consistent troublemaker here. In a lot of countries, the people who decide on the position, there's one or two people. So, in effect, in a lot of countries, it's just a case of finding the one or two people who actually determine the policy on these things. We need to get better at developing counter-arguments. So, we need to be able to show that licensing is not a solution. Jonas mentioned the extended collective licensing example. It's great where it works. One of the flaws of the Out of Commerce Work proposals in the EU is simply that the institutions necessarily don't exist in most countries and are nowhere near existing. So we need to have good examples of why licensing is not the answer, why exceptions are. We need to work on the holdouts. We need to be able to isolate the EU. They're the troublemakers. They were the ones who tried to stop Marrakesh. Michel Barnier, who's now got a sort of stranglehold on the UK as part of the Brexit process, he was there trying to stop it. He'd been lobbied. He was trying to stop it happening, which is, it's pretty disgusting, really. I don't know, it's pretty unconscionable, but nonetheless, it had been effectively lobbied, so he tried to stop it. And of course, any suggestions, both on this, on how we can work together, and on the strength of the arguments that I was setting out earlier, is very gratefully received. Thank you.